There are moments in leadership that are hard to explain. You're in a meeting, things are moving, but not really. Everyone is saying the right things, but nothing is quite landing. So you step in, you push it forward, and for a moment it seems to work. But afterwards, something feels slightly off. Not wrong, just forced. And I think most leaders recognize that feeling more than they are willing to admit. See, for a long time now, we've been operating with a particular assumption about people, that we are a kind of machine. That if you apply the right input, you get the right output. If something isn't working, you adjust, you tweak the system. If change is needed, you manage it into existence. And to be fair, that way of thinking has served us. It's helped build extraordinary systems and organizations. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just a useful model and became how we see ourselves. And that shift matters because a machine is something you operate from the outside. It doesn't self-correct. It doesn't adapt from within. It doesn't have an inner sense of direction. It just waits to be operated. So if that's your mental model of people, even unconsciously, you end up leading in a very particular way. You push harder when things don't move. You take more control when things feel uncertain. And you try to fix things from the outside in. More urgency, more pressure. And the thing is, sometimes that works, but often you are just pushing against something that was never going to respond to pressure in the first place. So there's a point where pushing harder stops being leadership and starts being the problem. De Hoc, who built Visa into one of the most complex financial systems in the world, once said, people are not human resources, things to be manipulated or controlled. They are entire human beings, limitless, until we start limiting them. And what's important there, it's not just what he said, but where it came from. See, this was someone who deeply understood systems and scale, and he still found himself questioning the assumptions underneath how we lead and organize. Now, that's worth sitting with. At the heart of this is a simple shift in perspective. We are not machines. We are living adaptive systems. We respond, we adjust, we sense, and we learn in ways that are not always linear or predictable. Think about the last time a team just clicked, without anyone forcing it, or when clarity arrived, not through more effort, but through, stepping back. That's not mechanical. That's something else at work. And when people start leading from that understanding, something changes. Conversations slow down just enough for something real to be said, and decisions become less forced. Teams start finding their own way without needing constant pressure from above. And not because the standards drop, but because you're no longer working against the grain. This is also how I find myself working with people, particularly in contexts where leadership is required. And not by adding more technique or introducing another model, but by creating the conditions, where people can reconnect with something they already have access to, their own clarity, their own judgment, the deeper intelligence that gets buried under all of the noise. Not something to be installed, but something to be recognized. And in a world that is increasingly shaped by AI, the shift becomes even more relevant. And not because AI replaces us, but because it highlights what cannot be reduced to systems, to outputs, and to optimization. It makes the question more visible. What does it actually mean to lead as a human being in a world that is increasingly automated, and accelerated? That answer doesn't come from doing more. It comes from seeing differently. So I'll leave you with a simple reflection. Where in your leadership are you still trying to push something that might actually respond better, to space? And what might become available if just for a moment you stop treating it like a machine and start listening to it like something alive? Because sometimes what looks like resistance is actually intelligence we haven't yet learned how to hear.